Welcome to the Jewelry Resellers Podcast, your go-to source for all things shiny, sparkly, and of course, profitable. I'm your host, Desiree, and I'll be your guide on this dazzling journey through the world of reselling jewelry. We'll be diving deep into the art and science of reselling, uncovering valuable tips, insider secrets, and sharing stories from successful jewelry resellers. We'll explore market trends, industry news, and even discuss how to find those hidden gems just waiting to be discovered in thrift stores, estate sales, and beyond. So if you're dreaming of turning your hobby into a hustle, or if you're a seasoned pro looking to stay at the top of your jewelry reselling game, join me each week for insights, stories, and more on the Jewelry Resellers Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Jewelry Resellers Podcast. I'm your host, Desiree, and today we are going to talk about something that is a really hot topic in the reseller community in general, but we're going to focus on it from the jewelry resellers perspective, and that is, when is it time to quit your job and become a full-time jewelry reseller? Like I said, this is a hot topic no matter what kind of reseller you are, because I think this is the goal for so many people. And there are definitely some things to think about if you are considering making this transition into being a full-time jewelry reseller. Now, jewelry reselling has its own set of unique challenges and considerations, and we're going to talk about those today. All right, but before we get started, you know I always like to remind you to join our newsletter family, because I send out a newsletter every week, and I try to make sure that I keep you up to date on things that are happening as it relates to jewelry and as it relates to reselling and anything else, news, updates, product announcements, whatever. So when you join the newsletter, I will also send you my personal list of the 20 best-selling vintage jewelry brands that all resellers should know. And this is from my own experience. This is from my own tracking and data over the years. And I want to send that list to you for free. So if you're interested in joining our newsletter family, all you have to do is head on over to the website, and that is jewelryresellerspodcast.com. Again, that is jewelryresellerspodcast.com. All right, let's get back to today's topic. And because so many of us want to do this full time because we love it so much, we have to be very careful that we don't make a quick decision or put ourselves in a position where we may have to figure things out that we didn't think about ahead of time. All right, so what we're going to talk about today, what I'm going to share today, are some things I want you to think about if you seriously are considering being a full-time jewelry reseller. Yes, it can be done. I know many people who do it, and I do it at this point in my jewelry reselling career. Although full transparency, it's not the only thing I do. I left my corporate job in 2019, and I have not gone back to any type of employment since then. Now, I do consider myself a full-time jewelry reseller, but like I said, jewelry reselling is not the only thing that I do. But it is a huge part of my income. And if you don't know, I guess I consider myself a full-time content creator as well, because I do that every week, this podcast being one of the things. But I also have little side things that I do here and there that bring in money every week. And so when I consider myself a full-time reseller, it's because I am not actually working at a job, but I am making money. Like I said, a good portion of my income does come from jewelry reselling. So, but you know what? There was a time when I was full-time on eBay, and that was the only thing I was doing. I mean, yes, I did YouTube here and there, but for the most part, I was a full-time eBay seller, and I was selling jewelry, but I was selling some other things as well. I wasn't only focused on jewelry. So I just want to be clear on that I do have some experience doing this. And like I said, I have not gone back to employment since I have made this decision to transition out of corporate America or having a corporate job. And this isn't to say that I may not ever go back to having a job. For me, it would have to be something pretty pretty fantastic for me to consider working for somebody else again. Not, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but for me at this point in my life, it would be really hard for me to go back to working for someone else and not having the flexibility with my schedule and with my income. It would have to be something, like I said, pretty spectacular for me to give that up. And it hasn't always been easy. It hasn't always been something that has gone smoothly. I have had struggles. I have had challenges. I have had inconsistencies. And this isn't because I think I failed, but I think it's just kind of the nature of doing what we do and how it can be very unpredictable. And even now, I have moments where I'm still not exactly totally secure with what I'm doing because I know how inconsistent it can be. And this is where you have things set up so that way you don't feel stressed and you don't feel so unstable, or I guess unstable, as it relates to your money and your income. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into the points, because I think this will take a lot of thought. It will take a lot of thought and a lot of planning on your part if you are trying to make jewelry reselling your full-time career. Okay? All right, so transitioning from a regular job to becoming a full-time jewelry reseller is a huge step. And like I said, this is going to require careful planning and consideration. All right. And I really want you to spend time thinking about this. Please do not rush into this decision and give yourself time to marinate on some of the points I'm going to share today, because I don't want anyone doing something and they feel like they've made a huge mistake, because I've seen that happen too, not just with jewelry resellers, but resellers in general. Okay. So the first thing we want to really think about is the financial stability. I think this is pretty obvious. This goes without saying. And this is the most important part, because there is no way anybody, especially when you have responsibilities and obligations and things to take care of, there's no way anybody would quit a job and not have the financial stability in place. At least I hope there's nobody out there doing that. So how can you get yourself financially stable? Well, one of the things you can do is have a savings. Now, it's very interesting because a lot of resellers I know actually don't have a savings. I mean, maybe they have savings for, their personal finances, but they don't really have savings for their business. And that's something I really want you to think about and to start implementing if you have not done so already. All right, so we're talking about savings both for your personal and your business, and you want to ensure that you have enough savings to cover at least 6 to 12 months of your living and business expenses. I mean, this is ideal, okay? I'm not saying you have to adhere to these guidelines, but ideally, if you really want to feel confident in making this transition, this is what you would have in place for yourself. Because this financial cushion can support you during the initial phases when business may not necessarily be predictable or may not necessarily be consistent. Now, we all know reselling has its ups and downs. Reselling has seasons where things are good, and then there's seasons when things are not that good. All right, so you really want to make sure you have enough money saved so you can accommodate all of these fluctuations. Now, the other thing you want to make sure you have in place is some type of a consistent income. Yes, this can be done with jewelry reselling. Like I said, I know a lot of people who do it, but you want to make sure that you are generating consistent and sufficient income to cover your expenses, your taxes, your cost of operations, all of those things. It's very wise to have a track record of steady income for at least several months, maybe even several years. All right, because we are not going to just do this blindly. We are going to make sure that we have the numbers to really support this decision. All right, the other thing under financial stability is your debt and your expenses. Ideally, you don't want to have any debt, because the last thing you want to worry about paying is a credit card or a loan or whatever. I mean, of course, you probably have a mortgage or, whatever, but you really want to reduce or eliminate any high interest debt and unnecessary expenses before you make the transition into being a full-time reseller. Because this will just give you peace of mind, and it will ease the financial pressure, that comes along with having to pay off these debts, and that stress can affect and impact your business as well. Because if you're so worried about that, it's going to be really hard to stay focused on your business and growing your business and doing all the things that you need to do in order to keep your business running effectively. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to really think about, and that's the financial stability. All right, my second point is to really examine the market viability and your business plan. In other words, what is the reselling market? How is it looking for you right now? Is this something you can consider long term? Is this something that you can see yourself doing for a long time? You also want to have a business plan in place. Now, this doesn't have to be anything formal or anything that you pay someone to outline for you, but you really have to have in writing, whether you use a notebook or a doc, whatever. You really want to have a clear and a very well thought out business plan outlining your business strategy, because you want to know all of these things. You want to know what a successful business looks like for you. In other words, you know what your day looks like. You know what your sourcing looks like. You know how you're going to be listing your items. You know what your schedule looks like, and you know what your customers or your clients ideally, you know who those people are. You have all of this information, so that way you know how to strategize a plan to keep your business running smoothly and profitably. You may even want to do some projections where you say within, 3 months, I can project that my business will have X amount of dollars in revenue. And you may even want to figure out how you're going to expand or scale your business once you get to a certain point. Now, this is not all stuff that you have to come up with right away, but this should definitely be a working plan that gets adjusted, maybe gets updated as you go, and maybe you add things in and take things away as you're moving forward. All right, the other thing you want to really think about is consistent market research. In other words, you need to understand your target buyers as well as what your competition is doing. Now, you don't have to necessarily be super competitive, but you want to see what other people are doing as it relates to jewelry reselling and what is working for them and what is not. All right, you want to ensure that there is a demand for the type of jewelry that you plan to sell, and that you have strategies in place to differentiate yourself from everyone else. Because as we all know, there's a lot of jewelry resellers out there, and not everybody is, selling at higher levels. But You really want to keep a pulse on what is happening within the jewelry reselling space so you can add in, maybe take away some things, maybe you can adapt some things, maybe you can, not necessarily copy, but you can do something similar in your own way so your business works for you. Now, the other thing I want you to think about is scalability. Because if you plan on doing this as your full-time career long term, at some point you will scale. I think that's just kind of the natural, organic growth in a business, because if you are consistently making money and you are attracting the right customers who are, letting other people know what you do, or if you are just consistent, then kind of by default, your business will grow because people will see you, like I said, consistently. And that in and of itself really just lends to consistent growth. All right. So you want to assess whether your business model can scale. Do you want it to scale? And then when we talk about scaling, what's the rate that you want your business to grow? Like, do you want to grow gradually, or would you be totally happy and fine and comfortable growing quickly? Because I've seen this happen where somebody, they go from 0 to 100 within a few months. And some people, they just slowly kind of plug along, and that's okay for them. So I think you need to consider the rate of growth too, and what you would like and what you can handle, both in your business and personally. Because let me tell you, it will impact your personal life in some way if your business is growing rapidly. All right, so consider if there are opportunities for growth and expansion. Like I said, you want to explore online selling, maybe live selling, which is my favorite right now. Maybe even diversifying the types of products or items that you sell. Because even though we are jewelry resellers, sometimes there's accessories or maybe things that are kind of related to jewelry that you may want to add to your inventory. And you also want to think about how can you be more efficient when you are increasing your business operations. How can you get more efficient at sourcing? How can you get more efficient at listing? How can you get more efficient at packing and shipping your items? All of these things. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is a concept I call operational readiness. Operational readiness. Now, this is a concept, an idea about, do you have a solid operation in place so you can step into this full time? In other words, what is your supply or your sourcing looking like? Do you have reliable suppliers or sourcing systems in place so you can step into this, like I said, full time? Are you set up so you can step into this as a full-time jewelry reseller? Do you know how to get the amount of inventory you need every week, every month, whatever, so you can hit your income goals? Because you really want to have this process and this system very streamlined. You don't want to be trying to figure this out after the fact you have quit your job, right? You want to be able to source the inventory you need. You want to be able to source the supplies you need. And you want to make sure you have multiple sources probably for these things, so you're not totally dependent, so your business is not totally dependent on just one source for your jewelry, because that is a recipe for disaster. And I speak from experience here. Okay. So I'll just say that much. You want to have multiple sources for your jewelry inventory. Now, the other thing that comes under operational readiness is your systems and your processes. I think I've talked about this quite a bit, not only today, but in other episodes. We talk about having a system in order to make sure your business is operating at the level you need it to, so it can make the money that you need it to make. And you're going to have multiple systems and multiple processes in place Because depending on how you are running your business, everything will have to be, yes, consistent and streamlined like we talked about, but you need to have a clear idea of what part of your business may need improvement, what parts of your business are working, and what parts of your business may need to be refined or changed or eliminated in some cases. And the way you will know that is if you have a system for each part of your business. Okay, so this is very crucial. And again, it'll probably take you some time to figure it out, but you don't want to be figuring all this out after you've quit your job. Like, these are things you want to know before you quit your job so you know what's working and what's not. All right, the other part under operational readiness is legal and tax obligations. Now, I don't really go into this a lot on this podcast because I'm not sure how I can do it in a way that helps everyone, because all of our tax situations are very unique and different. And so you want to make sure you got that figured out before you move into doing this full time. All right, so you want to really understand and know the legal and tax implications of running a full-time business from home or from a warehouse or however you're going to do it. And you may need to, set up or register your business, as a corporation, an LLC, whatever. You may need to get some business licenses, and you really want to make sure you figure out your tax situation. How are you going to be paying your taxes? Are you going to do it quarterly? Are you going to do it yearly? You really want to know this before you quit your job, because you don't want to be figuring all of this out. And you don't want any surprises either, because that could be catastrophic, if you're not planning for your taxes or figuring out the legal responsibilities you have as a business owner, maybe someone who's self-employed, however you structure it. Okay, so make sure you get that figured out before you quit your job. Okay, so the next point I have is personal readiness. All right, so we talked about operational readiness, but now we want to talk about personal readiness. What is your passion and your commitment to doing this? Because on the surface, we all love jewelry. It's pretty, it's fun. It's fun to source it. It's fun to wear it. It's fun to show it off. But you want to make sure that you're truly, truly engaged with this, and that you're passionate about it enough to keep doing it even when you may face some challenges or some hiccups or some difficult times. Just like you go to work, whether you feel like it or not, you really have to get into that mindset when it comes to being a full-time jewelry reseller. Like, this is something you're going to have to do and work on every day, every week, whether you feel like it or not, because this is your livelihood. All right, so make sure you're fully committed to the hustle of running your own business. And reselling in general can be very demanding, and sometimes it can be very draining. And it also requires continuous effort and continuous learning. And I talk about that all the time. We will never know everything there is to know about jewelry. And so we are going to constantly be called upon to upgrade our knowledge, to upgrade our skills, okay? So think about that. Think about how truly committed you are to doing this for however long. All right, the other thing you want to think about as it relates to your personal readiness is your risk tolerance. Evaluate your comfort, I guess, with uncertainty and risk, because I'm going to tell you, reselling is not a guarantee in any way, shape, or form. And so many of us know this, and we experience this even when we're not doing this full time. Unlike a regular job, business income is very unpredictable, and it can fluctuate based on a variety of factors and things that are going on. All right, so this is where, like I said earlier, your savings will help you Maintain some mental and emotional stability so you're not stressed and worried and all over the place if something unpredictable happens. And I'm going to let you know, it probably will. It probably will. All right, so we also want to think about the work-life balance. How are you going to run your business? How will this impact your personal life? How will this impact your relationships? How will this impact your family? Are you still going to be able to do the things you need to do in your personal life and as it relates to your family obligations as a full-time jewelry reseller? Being your own boss, it requires long hours and sometimes working 7 days a week, maybe late at night or super early in the morning, whatever. So you're going to have to figure out what boundaries you're going to have to put in place and make sure that your family is supportive, or make sure that your partner is supportive and understands that this, the hours aren't just clear cut. The schedule could be very different. Even though you're in control of your time, what I've noticed is that a lot of times you will put in way more time working your business than you do at a job. All right. Now, the other thing, which I know a lot of us don't like to think about, but this is my next point, and that is an exit strategy. Do you have a contingency plan in place in case the business does not go as you expected? If you decide to quit your job and become a full-time jewelry reseller, will you give yourself a certain amount of time to see if it works out for you before maybe going back to a job or pivoting in some way and doing something completely different? Because you have to have, I guess, a plan B if this doesn't work out. And I know nobody likes to think about that. I don't like to think about that, but it is a huge possibility. Things could happen maybe in your personal life that now doing reselling full time just doesn't work. Things could happen financially where you realize this doesn't work, whatever the case may be. So I don't know, maybe you give yourself 6 months or a year after you quit your job and you do this full time. And if it's not looking like how you want it to look, or it's not paying you like how you want it to pay you, what is your plan if you have to exit being a full-time jewelry reseller? Will you downgrade it to maybe just doing it part-time and then going back to work part-time? There's a lot of ways it can look for you. You just have to have some kind of idea of what you're going to do in the event that happens. All right, point number 6 is you want to make sure you have health insurance and benefits in place. This is a huge one, again, for a lot of resellers. Now, a lot of people, when they do this and they move into full-time reselling, this is not something they worry about because they have a spouse or a partner and they get the health insurance and benefits, through their spouse's job or something like that. But you can also buy health insurance individually, through an insurance broker, and they have a lot of plans in place. But you're just going to have to see what fits in your budget and what type of coverage you will need so you are covered in the way that you want to be. But you want to plan out all of this stuff. You want to plan how you're going to replace employment benefits, like I said, such as health insurance, retirement plans, maybe even vacations and all that type of stuff. You want to research options that are available for self-employed individuals in your area, and that's just one way to do it. So that is what I have. I have a individual plan for myself and for my son, and it works great. And luckily we really haven't had to use it, but if we do need it, it's there. And so you don't want to get yourself in a bind where, something happens and you don't have adequate coverage. Okay, so make sure that you do have some type of solution for that in place. All right, the last thing I want to share with you is having a long-term vision. Having a long-term vision, because if you are going to do this as your full-time thing, do you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life? I know that sounds huge and it sounds overwhelming to think about, but what is your long-term goal as it relates to being a full-time jewelry reseller? Do you want to retire doing this? Like, do you want to do this until, you can't do it anymore? Or, like we talked about earlier, do you plan on going back into the workforce, for any reason? Think about, what does your jewelry reselling business look like a year from now, 5 years from now, even 10 years from now? So, having clarity about what this looks like for you in the long term, I think is going to be very helpful for you when you decide if and when you want to do this full time. And remember, you're not locked into this, okay? You don't have to be committed to this forever, although some of us want to be committed to this forever. For me, I would love to do this forever. I would love to do this and just travel all over the world and look at beautiful jewelry and find beautiful jewelry to sell or to showcase in some way. I could see myself doing that forever. But you never know. Maybe as I get older, my plans or my ideal life could change, but I do see this as a lifestyle for me, where I will always be enjoying jewelry, looking for jewelry, studying jewelry, sharing jewelry. In some way, shape, or form, that is what I want to do. Now, I may not always be a jewelry reseller, but I can't imagine not being a jewelry reseller, right? But we never know what the future holds. So I say that to you because I want you to really think about what your long-term vision is as it relates to doing this, and you can make that look however you want. It can be in whatever capacity works for you at whatever particular stage of life that you are in. So in closing, making the leap to full-time jewelry reselling is not just about having enough sales. It's really about having a sustainable business and having practices in place that help you make the business what you want it to be. It's also about being financially prepared and financially stable and knowing what the market is doing as it relates to how you want to sell your jewelry or resell your jewelry. We also talked about personal readiness and operational readiness for being an entrepreneur. Okay, so if you decide that everything, all the boxes are checked off and that all systems are go, this can be a very rewarding career that fits into your lifestyle and helps you express your passions and your interests as it relates to jewelry, reselling, and everything that comes along with it. So let me know your thoughts on this topic, and do you have plans to ever transition into being a full-time jewelry reseller? I would love to know, and I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me. I will check in with you again really soon.